And there it is. Wonderful. All right. Welcome to the Monday, February 22nd, 2021 meeting of the Dennis-Yarmouth Regional School Committee. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Just going to look at the Zoom here, take attendance. I see Zane Fitzgerald, James Dykeman, Jennifer Rose, Joe Tierney, Phil Morris, Joe Glenn, and our 2 student representatives, and Carolyn Ken. Wonderful. Okay, we're all here. The first order of business will be our reports from our student representatives. And let's see if you need to be.
Grace, do you want to go first?
Okay, I will. There's not too much to report on, especially since last week was vacation week. This week, the DY math team has their final meet of the season. And since this is our last meet, Mr. Thompson, who teaches multiple courses at the school and who is our advisor, created individual goodie bags for each of us that he's able to hand out to the students that are in school. And he's arranging pickup/drop-off times for the students who are fully remote. So I just thought that was really nice. I wanted to give him a shout out for that, for making our last meet special, even though it's so difficult this year. And winter sports, there's a few winter sports are starting, such as volleyball. They had their first practice today, and football, I know that they're starting up. And I know a lot of my friends, they're very, very excited for that. Tynan?
All right. So the ambassadors are planning, you may have heard about this, but the Step Up Day that the 7th graders do every year, unfortunately is unable to go and proceed because of, everything that's going on. But what the ambassadors are doing at DY is they're doing a virtual Step Up Day. So they're doing, video recordings of interviews with 8th grade teachers. I believe we've already recorded the tour of DY for them to see. And we gave them a Google form asking, if you have any questions, please ask. And we received, a lot, like over 100 questions. And right now we're working on recording and submitting the videos of all the questions by the units and everything. So that's happening, and we're just finalizing and finishing out all those little things. And again, like Grace said, there's not much new.
All right, thank you both very much. Our next item of business are reports from the liaisons to the boards of selectmen. Any report from anyone who attended a Dennis selectmen meeting? No. Okay. Any report from Yarmouth?
Yeah, Madam Chair, there was a discussion and obviously there was a full meeting, but there was a pertinent discussion about, again, the feasibility study, which, my opinion was it was put to bed, but I'm just reporting on the discussion. And there were several discussions both at the beginning and at the end of the meeting. And it went to a kind of a good faith conversation. Obviously the DHY water wastewater issue is part of their logic, but there's still discussion. And I had brought up privately as a citizen in a previous meeting the feasibility study and their concerns about good faith. And so I was surprised that the chairman of the Yarmouth Selectmen said that he was surprised at the conversation, and other selectmen were saying that this was a conversation and it gives them a bad feeling. So I'm just reporting that there is still conversation on it, and this was obviously Monday night's meeting. So last Monday night's meeting. So we'll see if it comes up again, but I just thought that was pertinent to our discussions, because they even said that they thought that the superintendent should write a letter to Dennis talking about the funds. And I thought it was put to bed when Dennis had their town meeting. So anyway, thank you. That's all I have.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they can certainly discuss it. It's not anything that the school committee or our staff can take any action on or should take any action on, as far as I'm concerned. It's Dennis, the voters of Dennis took a vote at Dennis town meeting as to how much to contribute to the feasibility study. And, you know, I'm not sure there's any more action to be taken on that. So
they kept on, you know, they mentioned the school committee and they mentioned the superintendent. So
yeah, I mean, we don't control how that's funded. So, okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Joe. Building committee report, Joe Tierney.
Yeah, I don't have anything in particular. I know we've got a bunch of votes for the bond notes. I don't know if Carol or Ken have anything additional, if they've heard from our project managers or anything, or MSBA on anything, but I think, you know, we haven't met. We'll probably be meeting sometime in March to, you know, start going over bids and things like that. So they're moving along. It's a lot of background work with our project managers they're doing a lot of work behind the scenes right now. So that's all I have.
That sounds like the fun part coming up, Joe, looking at the bids.
Yeah.
And seeing how this is really going to come together.
Yeah, they'll it's going to be exciting. It's going to get, it's kind of a roller coaster. You know, there's some good times, there's bad times, and there's exciting times and not exciting times. So, and I think we're kind of at a low point where we're kind of starting to climb back up that hill to get revved up again to get going. So, it'll be exciting. So, stay tuned.
Thank you,
Madam Chair. Can I just ask a question on that one?
Sure, Joe. Do you have the raise hand function that would really help me be able to?
No, I didn't. Oh, there it is. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, go ahead. That just helps me line up speakers.
Yeah, I didn't see it on my screen.
Yep, go ahead.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
So I wanted through you to ask Joe, or if you know, so when we're going through the bonding and those contract, you know, that funding, and I only bring this up because E&D's in the back of my head, and I know that our bonding is related to that. Once we set a percentage of the thing, is that a done deal? Once we have the financing, we vote on it or whatever, can that change? Is basically my question, based on our status and how we're looked at as a district, as opposed to, you know, for the funding and the, you know, say the percentage of the loans, et cetera.
So you're talking about the percentage of the interest rate on the loans, not necessarily the reimbursement, right?
Correct.
That I don't know. I believe that it's once that's a set rate. Once it's all set up, and we get that, where it's a set rate and it can't change.
We have a representative in the meeting tonight from,
Right.
you know, and she'll go through. She can answer, I think, probably better the questions about the bonding.
Right.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Assistant Superintendent's report. Speaking of the bonds.
Yes, and this evening you saw in front of you the very kind of very specific, very lengthy, multiple motions that need to be approved this evening for us to move forward with the project. As Joe pointed out, it's wrapping up, I think, bids this week and early next week, and then we'll jump into the next phase and it'll be exciting. Our Unibank representative, who takes incredibly good care of the district, is here this evening, Lynn Welsh, and she can speak a little bit more to some of the detail. But the motion, as we go through it this evening, as you can imagine, It's required each step of the way. Needs to be clear who voted yes and no for it, so that all that gets documented tomorrow. And hopefully the chair and the treasurer can come in very early tomorrow and sign the proper documentation so we can get it off to those who need it. So joining us this evening from Unibank, Lynn Welsh.
Good evening. How are you? It's good. Well, we got some great news with these bids, which I'll get into. But I just wanted to let the school committee know that if you don't want to read verbatim the vote that's in front of you, we can summarize it with the reference that the full text of the vote will be incorporated into the school committee meeting. So I defer to you how you would want to do that, Jenny.
So you'd be okay if I accepted one motion, or do you need multiple motions?
As far as the vote, because it is kind of lengthy, I would just summarize it to the effect that the board votes to approve the sale of the $38,562,540 bond anticipation note loan to Morgan Stanley at a net interest cost of 0.086, and that the remaining votes of the school committee will be incorporated into the minutes. It can be that simple if you'd like.
Okay. Would anyone like to make that motion as presented?
I will make that motion and as related by our Unibank representative. And do you need me to actually use specific words other than we will as written in the
I think Phil, you're just you have it voted that you accept the bid by Morgan Stanley. So Phil, basically you'd be reiterating that second voted paragraph that's in front of you.
Yes. The second one, move to approve the sale of 38 million. Okay.
Correct.
I will read that just to make sure something officially gets recorded as well. I move to approve the sale. My motion is to approve the sale of $38,562,542 not, and the 2 is 2%, general obligation bond anticipation notes of the district dated March 1st, 2021 and payable October 6th, 2021 to Morgan Stanley and Company LLC at par and accrued interest, if any, plus a premium of $440,679.83.
Phil, $769, right? And 83 cents.
Yeah, that's right.
Second.
All right. The motion has been made and seconded, and now I'm sure we have a lot of discussion.
Well, if I can make an introduction, Jenny, just
please, yes, please present away. Yep.
Just to give a committee an overview of the process, and since we last talked, I know the last time we spoke, we were gearing up for this. We spoke, we being Ken and Jane Saucier, spoke to Standard & Poor's, our normal procedure to get a short-term rating on the notes. So S&P came back and gave the district the SP1 plus, which is the highest note rating, which is fairly standard, but more importantly, they did reaffirm the district's AA plus rating on outstanding bonds. So that was the first kind of hurdle, if you will, to get over. And then the day of the sale, I can't tell you how extremely pleased I was with the bids. We had 6 syndicates bidding on the notes. Morgan Stanley obviously was your low bid, but when you factor in the $440,000 premium that the district received on that bid, it brought your net interest cost to a 0.086%. I mean, how close to zero can we possibly get, right? Great time to be in the market. Timing is everything, right, folks? So, so let me just walk you through what that all means to you regarding premium. Okay, so of that 400, and let me put my glasses on here, of my 440,000, 769.83% premium, that basically is a cash payment to you on top of the 38.5 that the district went out and borrowed, okay? So out of that 440, we take out the cost of issuance, okay? And that leaves you with $388,884, give or take a few cents, okay? That you get to put towards project cost. So that's money now that the district does not have to borrow. Okay, it's not money that you can add additionally to what was authorized, because that comes off your authorized unissued piece. But that's money now that it's cash. It's cash to go to project, and you don't borrow that. I will now take it off of the district share, if you will, of what you need to borrow for this project. So as you can imagine, this is the same process that will happen when the district goes out to bond in October, end of September, October. You will get a premium on those bonds. And again, that premium we will put towards project cost. As there's no guarantee of what the amounts will be, but that's the way the market is bidding. It has been bidding, and I don't expect that to change. So we could look at the end of the day, conceivably, $1 million in cash up front, maybe to the district that, you don't have to assess debt service on to the member towns. So knock on wood, we hope the market, holds up, but I don't foresee anything with, going forward as we roll into October and we look to see where rates are and where cash flow is. That maybe we can take a bigger chunk of this project. We'll see. We'll have to see. I can't say that right now, but take advantage of these low rates and these high premiums. So again, it was a great day to be in the market. Like I said, the low rate from Morgan Stanley was a 0.086. Your high bid was a 0.27. I mean, don't you wish this was your mortgage? But I was saying to Ken and Jane, because it was so low, we were actually laughing about it the day of the sale, because I think Ken thought I was, pulling his chain. And I said, I think this is close to zero in all my 30 plus years I've been doing this, that I've ever gotten, this low on an interest rate. But again, timing is everything, it's
That's tremendous.
So Joe, I do have a question for you. If you can, when do you anticipate opening up the bid documents?
I don't know when our next meeting is scheduled. Ken or Carol may know that.
And you're muted.
Yeah, we're looking at that first week in March.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're still pretty much on schedule where we were before. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I didn't know if there was anything that was scheduled as far as an exact date. I knew it was going to be at the beginning of March. But.
So do you have any questions regarding the bonds as we move forward? I think we've already kind of teed up our financing schedule for October. It'll be here before you know it, right? So I know there were some questions about maybe the interest rate being locked in on bonds or how that may be.
Right. I think Joe Glenn had that question about whether and what are they fixed once this is issued. Not that we want it to change based on this, but.
No, they will be fixed. It'll be a fixed interest rate. We do have the standard market 8-year call provision. So, you could call the bonds after, on or before the, on or after rather the 8th year. But, in Massachusetts, you need to have a present value savings when you refinance bonds of 3%. And we're in a market so low, we'd probably have to be in negative interest rates for you to ever refinance these bonds, right. Which I think would, economic wise, we'd all be in have more problems than that. But, I think I never say never, but I would highly doubt these bonds would ever be refundable with a 3% present value savings that you have to hit. You're as low as you can go.
That's great.
I'd like to make an observation about timing. When we did the high school back in the 90s, we were coming in for bids right after the big dig in Boston was finished, and people, contractors and subcontractors were hungry for work. We got excellent bid situation then, and we figured we'd never see that again. And totally different set of circumstances now. At least we got a bright spot for this project. Thanks again.
Joe Glenn has his hand raised. Joe Glenn.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Lynn, so I'm so happy at that. That is fantastic. You know, not that I was really concerned about it being extraordinary, but I'm curious to know how do they look when Morgan Stanley or you are looking at the district and the health of the district. What are you looking for? So, you know, obviously this can't get any better for us, but at the district health as a overall, what do you look for? In my, I'll tell you the reason why is, you know, we have a discussion about excess and deficiencies, and if we have a good figure of excess and deficiency reserves, how does that look on the health of the district, and what other stuff do you look at?
Well, that's a really good question, and it's kind of, and I will kind of tell you what's happening in the world of the rating agencies these days. Of course, pension and OPEB are the two, 800-pound gorillas in the room, if you will. Barnstable County Retirement extended their funding schedule. And of course, this isn't just to the district. This is actually all the issuers that are involved in the Barnstable County Retirement System that, it's your peers in Yarmouth. Again, I was with Wellfleet this morning on a rating call, and they're looking, Barnstable County extended the funding schedule to 2037, 2 years out, while they're within the funding of the 2040 parameter of that funding schedule for pension systems. The rating agency has large concerns about the methodologies being used in some of those assumptions in the county retirement valuation. So it's something that we're looking at and talking to the Cape communities. It does score low on your debt ratios. So that is a concern, but that is less out of your control, I guess, until you maybe all get together and have some discussion with those at the retirement system. But I think I'm getting probably out of my lane at that point here. But the one thing that is in your control is the OPEB funding. And they do acknowledge that the district is funding that obligation. However, they would like to see it funded on a higher basis. And this is nothing new. There's nothing new to Dennis and Yarmouth to hear this or anybody else. This is the big push on the rating agencies for these unfunded liabilities. To address them and go after funding them more aggressively. On the reserve side, on the E&D, it's kind of been an interesting twist since COVID started with regional school districts in Massachusetts, because there was this great understanding that by state statute, you can't have more than 5% E&D. And then you have to turn it back, or you have to send it back to your member towns. What we're hearing from the rating agencies now is we understand the 5%, but we also understand that these districts do have the capability of establishing stabilization funds, which is a reserve. And I think they'd like to see, these stabilization funds being instituted and being funded. Easier said than done, but that's what we're seeing, the big push, but from the rating agencies. But I think for specifically to Dennis-Yarmouth, my takeaway when I talked to the analyst is that the district looked at funding OPEB. They don't give you levels that you want, but I think they want you to increase your contributions to the your OPEB trust that you've established. Again, they don't put that number out there for you. Everybody's different. Whether it's a budgeted line item that goes in every year, obviously for you it would be, but that's something to consider.
So, but for this project, we're over and out, and we don't have to worry about anything. We can't get any better.
I wouldn't say you're over and out, because we've just, every time we go to the market with an issuance, we need to talk to the rating agencies.
Yeah, you're going to the market in October.
Pardon me?
You're going to the market again in October, aren't you?
Yes, we are. Yep. So what can you do between now and October, right? Is like, you know, you can't move things quickly, right?
Right.
I just think, you know, when Ken and Jane and myself talk to the rating agencies, you know, maybe the district needs to have a discussion, the school committee, about maybe addressing additional funding to OPEB. You know, if you want to ask me what's in your, you know, what's in your, you know, purview that you can actually make a difference, that would be where it is. You're not going to change it. You know, the Barnstable County retirement system is, I think, going to be, you know, this issue is going to be around for a bit.
And then after October, then we're over and out.
Nope. Because we're not done, Joe. We're not going to be done with financing this final project, because we'll have a last piece of this. I envision we'll be out in the short-term market towards the end of this project, the end of the final financing, if you will. You're in the checklist kind of, you know, period. MSBA has not issued their final audit. So I envision having a small piece out there, and we kind of, you know, cross the T's, dot the I's as soon as we get the MSB audit finalized. So you actually know what your share is going to be. So
okay, great. Thank you so much.
But Joe, the other point you have to look at is you're never done with the rating agency, because you have a due diligence to your bondholders for as long as those bonds are outstanding. And what the rating agencies will do is they do due diligence calls. Just because you don't have a bond issue, you know, every 2 years, they'll check in with you and say, hey, you know what, we need to look at the district. We need to make sure that our credit rating that we had on them 2 years ago, you know, your AA plus is still, you're still running this district like a AA plus. So, you know, you have that obligation to the bondholders that you maintain that AA plus credit. And they will hold your feet to the fire for that as long as those bonds are outstanding. So you're really never done with them.
Great. Thank you so much. That's fantastic information, but that was exactly what I was looking for. Thank you.
Anyone else have questions for Lynn? Phil Morris?
Just wanted to say my own thanks for clarifying what is sometimes a rather dry subject when you're trying to have a discussion of bond ratings on town meeting floor or to a Board of Selectmen's meetings. You laid it out very well. I need all the help I can get. So thanks for the jargon and comments.
So, and I just want to make sure that logistically that we've taken care of all the required votes with Phil's motion. So, you know, Phil's motion was the language of the second motion there, motion to approve the sale. And then you said that the motion could also be that he makes that motion and all the other required.
The full text of the vote will be incorporated into the school committee meeting minutes.
So, but to be clear now, so that when we take a
vote awards the notes, that's the purpose really that we need. The other ones are kind of ancillary, if you will.
Okay, but so that everyone is clear. So Phil's motion is to approve the sale at that rate and all the other ancillary motions that will be included in the text of the meeting. So when everyone votes on this, we want to be clear in the record that you are voting on all the motions as printed in the agenda.
Correct.
Okay.
And that was my intent, to have the ancillary
That's-
motions. It was
That's what
buried
I
inside.
thought. I heard that. Yeah. Does
I'll
anyone
second.
the amendment there? Okay, perfect. Does anyone else have any questions on this while we have Lynn here? It's a complex subject, so. Okay, no further discussion. I'll take a roll call vote. Remember, you're voting on all the motions as printed in the agenda, please. Zane Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Jim Dijkman,
Yes.
Joe Tierney,
Yes.
Phil Morris,
Yes.
Jennifer Rose,
Yes.
Joe Glynn,
Yes.
Jenny Landers votes yes. I think I captured everyone. So unanimous vote, all the motions carry. Thank you very much, Lynn. That was great news.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
All right. And then the second part of your report, please.
Yep, I got the screen up. Am I in? Oh, hang on. I just got to get the screen share going and we're all good. No, I couldn't get. Yep. So good evening, the budget update. And many of these slides you have seen before as a committee. Those are our timeline dates. You know, March 8th, that'll be in theory the next meeting of the committee. It's often referred to as the final budget adoption, but all of you who are veterans know at any time you can continue to reduce that budget in that time frame. You really are simply in the process, you can't be increasing it at that point. And so we've often, finalized the budget in March and April. I know that can be anxiety producing sometimes, but I think we're in a good place, as you're probably aware, receiving the documentation this weekend to work through things, and then you can see our town meetings there. Again, foundation 5-year rolling average reflected because of the new regional agreement in 2019. I did add at the bottom, you can see the trend line, the next year that gets added into the 5 years when we start later. But for the FY22, we're looking at that 5-year rolling average of the 32.9166 and the 67.0834. And that's the guiding breakdown of the budget. And that's once you get everything above minimum required local contribution and so forth. Just want to put some context. A couple of committee members had asked me, what's our per pupil cost? How do we stack up, compared to other districts? And this is everybody's total budget and all the students they're paying for. And this is the breakdown. And you can see we're in a pretty good position compared to other people from the point of view. I don't think you can argue we're being spendthrifts. And yet I think we're in a place where we usually feel we are hitting the educational needs and taking care of our students with the programming. And we're frugal about it and we're capital. So you can see that FY19. There's no FY20 yet posted on the DESE where you can get those kind of updates. And so I put the source down below so you can look at that and you can see the range. I didn't put the 2 regional tech schools on here because they're disproportionate by the nature of the equipment, and they could be up in the $28,000 per pupil range. And so this is sort of the more traditional high schools that you're seeing on the Cape. The cherry sheet, again, you've seen before at Finance Subcommittee, we spoke about it, FY21, 22 pieces. The net increase on those cherry sheets was 26,854 after you follow the adds, the drops, the charges, and so on. So there wasn't in the traditional Chapter 70 a big influx in terms of revenue this year. However, when I get a little bit later, we'll talk about some of the other options that have put available funds for us to work with. The big variable for next September, as we all still know, is, I've heard this on news stories. We've heard it everywhere. We've talked about this before. Again, as a committee, are we looking at one teacher and 20 students in a classroom? Or are we still in that scenario where because of distancing and requirements, we're talking 2 teachers with 10 students each? And we're getting closer probably to hearing what a projected answer is, but there's no definitive. So on February 8th, the committee adopted this budget. That's the 4.26% budget. That allowed us to take care of the 6-foot distancing requirement, kept us at the current staff levels if we had to do that again. And there it is, and you've seen this broken down by DESE codes. Now, since then, and after the Finance Subcommittee on Wednesday, we continue to take a look at things. There's some potential adjustments that we could look at for assumptions today, operating assumptions, and I think they're reasonably good ones. Staffing levels at 3-foot distancing, with the caveat, we would use the ESSER grants, the emergency elementary and secondary monies related to COVID, much like we used to would use other grants. If we needed those staff, they're covered in the budget with the grants. But if we don't need those staff, then we can make other decisions, but we're not tying up our local funds, if you will, with that, and it doesn't impact the assessment in the way that using local funds would. So it's a way for us to hedge our bets using those ESSER monies and protecting our options. So we know no matter what we do in September, we'll have what we need. I did reduce some of the health plan, the increase. We went to that. So if I did about a 3%, not a 2.8, because I never want us to be in a situation where 4 people change their health plans or some new staff come on board and take health plans and we're right at the end. Since OPEB was mentioned a little bit, and full disclosure, Lynn and I have been talking about this earlier as one of the options. The superintendent and I had some discussion. There's also a 1-month premium with the health plans this year, in terms of there'll be 1 month where employees and the districts not required to contribute. I would think that might just be a great transfer for OPEB this year for us, at the very least, because if we can get into a place where we're always saying $25,000 to $50,000 a year with OPEB, that kind of contribution, I think that really will help us with the ratings down the road. Standard & Poor, as Lynn pointed out, still AA+. District's in a good place. We want to maintain that. And so some additional OPEB contributions. And since we're crafting the budget right now, I think we're able to do that without burdening other things in the budget. And that'll allow us in those conversations with Standard & Poor down the road in the fall to say, yep, we heard you. And we took care of some of it. The ESSER funding, the elementary secondary school emergency relief funds, examples of the adjustments again in the budget. The medical assistants, the COVID waiting room is what people often refer to them as. And you can see again, I was referencing using those grant funds. Making those adjustments would actually bring the budget down to the 66,923,869 and a 3.37% increase. And I know people would still like to see further work, and I think we're in a place to continue, but I feel like we don't ever want to come to multiple meetings in a row without some kind of adjustments to propose or make reductions. And so that kind of grew out of the Finance Subcommittee the other evening. And again, you can simply see that broken down by the DESE codes as well. And so as we continue to kind of narrow the gap, if you will, you take a look at those by DESE codes, and then lots of questions about, well, how do you use that money, that $2,271,000 in the ESSER grants? And I think a couple of requirements, just to kind of put it out there. It can be used in FY21, FY22, or FY23. And so I think we'd be wise to parcel it out a bit and protect ourselves. And yet, if we use that to constantly cover the kinds of items listed there, they have to be COVID related. But any PPE, I feel like we now have a huge stockpile of masks and disposable gowns and such. The technology for learning, we're in a good place because, again, we used special grants last year to put us there. That it is allowable for us to use those kind of funds to continue our revitalization, replenishing of the iPads, the rollover to get newer models. That is compliant, checked with the DESE. And so some of that monies that we would have used locally to make those acquisitions, those ESSER grants are going to help us with that. And that's going to allow us to also do some savings. And we all know the air circulation and air HVAC systems and purifiers are things that are constantly things people are looking at and having concerns with. And so again, we can use those funds in that area, thereby not using our local funds and finding perhaps additional reductions that would help our two communities with the annual assessment, but also not prevent us from doing what we need to do educationally. And so anyway, the next steps I would see is, at our next finance subcommittee meeting, maybe it's a working session really, where we're spending some significant time talking about, okay, what kind of decision making and what kind of proposals do we have out there for committee members to work through in terms of the next set of reductions for the budget. And those are possible reductions. And finally, getting to what's the best way to use the excess and deficiency funds. You received it, I think, earlier today. I must admit, it never occurred to me. I thought the committee chair got a copy of this. It came out last Thursday. Interestingly enough, the Department of Revenue sends the regional school districts excess and deficiency funds to the town and to the superintendent, but not to the school committee. And so forwarded that to you today. We are in a position because of incredible savings last year and all kinds of variables that went into it, that for the first time in maybe 15, 16 years, I'm not even sure anymore, we have over $2 million in excess and deficiency to look at. And I know the instant tendency is we need to address things and work on the assessments. Understandable, agreeable, I understand those pieces, but since we received it late Thursday afternoon, I think having a working session with the finance subcommittee where we could talk through different ways of looking at that, small special education buses, some of the capital things we've talked about. There's a number of opportunities here for the committee to say, here's ways we can take advantage of this situation. Also, make sure our towns get a viable budget that's manageable for them. I just didn't want to rush with all kinds of proposals for this evening, including that stabilization fund or a capital stabilization fund. Those may be ways to take care of multiple things and still take care of each of our two communities. So that's the quick update. Don't need a formal vote on the 66, 923, 450. Although if that's the direction the committee would, wants us to continue to work in, certainly would welcome the committee, acknowledging that. So we have a little bit of just guidance, but the next step really will be, okay, what's the next set of reductions? What are possible ways to look at using those grants? And then excess and deficiency, and what are the ways that could be used most effectively to take care of the district, take care of the communities. And that's kind of a very brief tour of the budget update.
All right, we'll just go right to questions. Joe Glenn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know we have that executive session meeting, so I'll be brief. And I know Ken mentioned that the finance subcommittee will be talking, especially about that E&D. But I think I think you now see where I was going with the bond-related questions and that OPEB type of questions previously. I did have a couple questions. Ken, I saw, and it was the exact amount on the choice revenue. The number was the exact same. Is that just because they're similar and we can't project out either plus or minus?
Fundamentally, it's just those numbers the state provided. I'm not sure how that will play out over the long haul, but yes, normally those numbers come straight from the state. They say use these numbers. So you saw that FY21, FY22 piece.
Yeah, I just saw that it was exact same number.
Yes.
So I was like, how could that possibly be,
That's simply the state.
586, 437. Nothing is exactly the same, but okay, yeah, I think I get why that happened. When we were talking about the staff variables and the ESSER funds, when we calculated the health insurance, we calculated that to be 1% difference to I know you said you don't know when someone's going to take the health care. We want to make that on the high side, but it just seems strange that it was 1% different. In other words, it went from when the 6 foot distancing versus the 3 foot distancing, it was a 1% difference, correct?
I'm not sure I'm following what you're saying.
Um,
'Cause that's about the staffing, not the health plan.
all right. No, I think it was just coincidental that it was 1% difference too, but
Yeah, because the 2.8% increase, I made a 3% increase on health just to kind of cover that. And again, there's additional possible savings with that. If you think about it, 1 month premium holiday, that's approximately an 8% piece, which is why that might be a way to say, okay, let's apply that to OPEB this year. It's money we kind of already had built in. So we're not looking in the budget to cut something else to then give money to the OPEB. And then maybe in the future, we'll just say it's a standard part of the budget, but it would allow us this cycle to do that, takes care of the bond, Standard & Poor, the bond rating people. And it's something we should try to do. That's all.
No, I agree 100%. I think that's a great approach. And my only concern is with the timing and the lack of communication with the towns now, because we don't know where they stand. We don't know what the appetite is. We don't know what their revenues, if they're doing great, if they're doing better than expected, because we're not having that communication. So I'd like to see us have those conversations so that when the finance subcommittee and the overall board is looking at things, we know what we can offer. But I agree 100% that OPEB approach, and also looking at that E&D, can we use that for those type of things for purifiers and other things going forward, so that we can project out the COVID costs from the ESSER grants, but I know what you were saying about spreading it out over the course of 2-3 years, but that E&D money we can use, and can we use it for staffing of social workers and psychological services and stuff, both the ESSER grant and the E&D funding? So those are the questions that I have that the finance subcommittee and the overall committee would be looked at. But I think we should be giving the towns some examples so that they can put in their capital plan, so that they can put into the schools ventilation issues or whatever the case may be in the long term. But if they put that in their long-term capital plan, because otherwise it goes out, and when they don't see that the school committee or the district is asking for anything on the capital budget, the bargaining units of the police, the fire, the town workers, they say, hey, you don't have anything, that the school's not asking for anything. So I think that we should ask, but I think we should have the conversation, because those time periods come up, and before we know it, we're up against making that final budget, and we don't know what the town is thinking. But thank you so much for the hard work and answering those questions in between, because I know there's a lot to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Tierney had his hand next.
Thank you, Jenny. Just a couple quick notes and things before I had a couple of questions. Just about using E&D, you know, I think that's something that we need to be very careful with, especially if we want to fund, you know, social workers or anything like that, because that's year after year. That's a reoccurring cost year after year. And if we don't have that money in E&D, we can't fund that. So we need to be very careful about what we use E&D for. You know, a good example is over at Matikes. What was a couple of years ago, they had an electricity problem where we had to pay to put a whole new main in, and that was, yes, you know, that was a ton of money to do, and we had to pull that, I believe, out of E&D funds. And you know, so it's those kind of things, that one-time things that to take care of. You know, maybe using it for COVID related things if we need to, that's great, but if we have the ESSER grants, then that's where it should be used. You know, and also the as far as our budget, I think we need to create our budget, and then, you know, then go to the town and say, this is what our budget is, because if we don't do that, we're always looking to them and saying, well, what do you think you can afford? And that's not the way it should work. I think we really need to come in with a budget, and granted, it should be within the 2.5%, but sometimes it can't be, but we need to come to them, because we can't get funding anyplace else. You know, we can't generate revenue. So that's just another thing. Ken, I just had a question on the it was 3.37% above for an increase.
Yes.
Is that a 3.37 above the 2.5%? That's 3.37 total.
Yeah, of the budget. It's budget related, not assessment related.
So basically we're like 0.87% above 2.5. If you subtract 3.37
of the budget, yes, the budget, not the assessments. Yes.
Right. So, you know, we're kind of close to that 2.5%.
Yes.
You know, and I know we've, again, I go back and forth on the E&D, but I know in past years we've used some funds from E&D to go into the budget, just to, you know, we want to try to not go over the 2.5%. So, you know, that 0.87% may be someplace that we can go to our E&D and grab that just as a one-time thing, or, you know, reduce the budget. But I think we're in a good spot. And, you know, again, I think if we can get a little tighter, that would be better, without losing programs and trying to keep going. You know, and you're doing a good job at, you know, finding funds and being able to make sure that we use them appropriately. So I think that's all the questions I have. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Zane?
Thanks. Just a quick question, Ken, you know, being the new person here, excess and deficiency, when, you know, it seems like that number surprises you a bit, and we totally understand why it is that happened, given what happened last year. But in a typical range, are we normally looking at, like, there's a couple $100,000, or is it normally something? I mean, is there any kind of range of what it typically is?
For us, the last 4 or 5 years has been about 500 to say 700 some odd thousand.
Okay.
So we knew it was going to be somewhat substantial this year. However, I must admit, I'm very cautious. So I spent most of the day double checking everything with the auditor and double checking with the DOR this afternoon with a call, just to make sure. You know, and I think there's a lot of places that are regional districts this year in a similar case because of what had played out last year. But normally 500 to about 700,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
So no, that helps me understand then what.
Yes,
the
context.
Yeah. Thank you.
Jim.
Phil Morris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I note that each year our relationship with the towns in budget approaches varies depending on how active the FinCom is, and each town uses their FinCom differently. My question would be to Ken and Carol: have either town made inquiries, or I mean, they do get copies of the packet if they want it, as do the selectmen. But it is one reason for establishing liaisons is that we would be picking up those from the school side, the conversations with the town halls or their discussions among themselves. But we haven't, with the combination of COVID, turmoil of changing town administrators, we haven't had any negative vibes that I can tell, but the coverage of back and forth information is not as robust as it has been in past times. We might want to give some thought to, in addition to our budget presentation, cluing the FinComs and or town administrations as to how we're doing.
If I could, I'd like to communicate to both communities. People have been very gracious about rescheduling meetings early on. In Dennis, they repeatedly gave extra time so we could have more budgetary figures to work with, including the governor's budget. Yarmouth Finance Committee graciously agreed to move. They originally, I think it was it last week, the 16th or the 17th? And I had reached out and had some, interactions with Mr. Lawton, Mr. Centio about bringing a budget that had no additional reductions to the FinCom seemed counterproductive to me at that time. And yet I know they're on a tight timeline. So there has been some interaction and communication. And I think so far people have been very understanding. And again, now that we have a much better handle on what is our funding really going to look like, I think we'll continue to share. I'll continue to reach out. Often my contact in Yarmouth has traditionally been working with Ed Centio, and the equivalent in Dennis is Marianne Gibbs. And so we do communicate and we have those conversations. And clearly the school committee is the board that communicates with the other boards. In general, professional staff communicate with professional staff, and we try to keep within those parameters. So,
as a follow-up to that, I'd like to note that we have a role to communicate to town meeting, and waiting until the actual day or week of town meeting is not the time to put something together, because we, after all, our budget final approval is the town meeting of both towns.
Joe Tierney, did you have another question, or is your hand just?
Yeah, no, I just had a quick question for Ken. Did we ever discuss, or did you ever discuss with the towns, with the executive secretaries about, how we have to go in front of each town for a hearing, or for, to show them what our budget is? Did we ever talk to them and saying, hey, can we be the last ones on the list? Because they have to go through police and fire and all that stuff.
yes.
And if we can get to the bottom of that list, I think that, because like you said, there's no sense in going to them with a 4.2% increase when we know it's not going to be that, and they know it's not going to be that. So it's a waste of time. So I think we should really, make sure that we're at the bottom of that list of when we have to go in front of any of those boards, just so we can give them a number that's a lot closer to what they can pallet and what we can, maintain. That's all. Thank you.
Yep. No, in general, they've offered that to us often, and we try to work within it. And so I think those things, right, again, it's just less conflict, less anxiety, less stress, the better for all of us. So people, I think, again, both towns have been somewhat open to that. And traditionally, the committee's budget hasn't gone to the select boards in Yarmouth, I think, till sort of the end of March, is maybe mid-March kind of thing. So, we're on track, as much as it may feel like, oh, okay. And again, now that we have our E&D number, and just for the just for the sake of it, I checked other schools on the Cape, the regions. Some of them still don't have their numbers. We go through this every year. I remember last year, felt like it took an eternity to get our number. At least we're in the position now where we can have conversations about what's realistic and what's viable. So we do try, they usually try to respect our request to go toward the end.
Madam Chair, I think, Madam Chair, I think Mr. Dykeman is raising his hand.
Oh, really? Okay. Jim?
I'd like to make people aware that there has been communications about capital needs with the towns. We've had tours of buildings. We've had reports published, provided to the towns and everything else. It's not like it's a shock to either town that there are needs to be completed in the schools. And I just want the public to be aware of that, because it sounds like we don't communicate. And in my opinion, as a longer, senior, I'm one of the senior committee members as far as time, and we've done a lot of communicating with the both towns. And I think I find it a little frustrating at times to hear that the towns are surprised about the capital needs of either, of the buildings. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Actually, I do see that Tracy Post has her hand raised. Maybe she wants to say something about presentation to Yarmouth Selectmen. I mean, we're not quite to public comment, but if Tracy wanted to address that, I can recognize you.
Hi, can you hear me, Jenny?
Yes, Tracy.
Thank you. I just wanted to say we have had recent presentations from our police and fire. So we're starting on the budget process. I just wanted to speak to Phil's point about our reaction. I think Phil knows that at the beginning of every budget cycle, we set a policy for all town departments and the school, which is the same basically every year, which is to, stay within our 2.5%. So that has been conveyed to the school district as well as all of our town departments. As you know, with COVID, we're making a lot of reductions. A lot of our receipts are down. So we're struggling. But to Phil's point about he hasn't heard reaction, there's really been nothing to react to. I've been hesitant really to bring any budget numbers to our committee, as I know that every year this is a starting point and it's not an end point. So, and we have not seen any assessment to date whatsoever. So there's really not been anything for us to react to at this point. But we will be having our the school district in for a budget process. I'm not sure exactly what date that's been scheduled for. I know tomorrow night we're meeting with our finance committee. There's been talk via email, and I'm not sure, I don't have it firsthand, but there has also been talk that the request to us will be to postpone town meeting to sometime in May, which today was the first time I heard that. So I'm not sure where that will go, but I think that that's an important piece, as we know that this process is always difficult for all of us when we do our budgets with the best information we have on hand. And it would really be nice for the state and the governor to do his budget first and then us to follow, but that's unfortunately not the way that it works. So, but to Phil, I just want to say that there's really, we have not seen an assessment at all. So there's nothing for us to react to. At some point in time, I'm sure we will. Whether or not it fits within our 2.5%, I'm not sure, but I think we've been doing this long enough to know that it's a work in progress, and I appreciate all your work. It looks like we get there every week. It gets a little bit better. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that I'm here in case there's any questions.
Great. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
All right, school committee members, any other questions on the budget currently for Ken? All right, no vote tonight, unless anyone, no. Okay, all right, thank you very much for that presentation. I know that you'll keep working on it, and FinCom just met, and I'm sure we'll be meeting again to review any proposed changes. So thank you. Superintendent's report.
Thank you. Whoops. Sorry, we have dueling computers here. I'm just going to make a few comments tonight in the way of good news, because we haven't done that for a while. Matakees Middle School would like to thank Odell's Art Supplies in Harwich for donating 4 art supply kits to 4 deserving artists here at Matakees. And Matakees is happy to say that they currently have approximately 80% of their student population back in person, and that they are able to offer 16 different after-school activities to their students, both in person and remotely. Over at Ezra Baker, here's the latest from EHBI. We will certainly be busy this month. In March, we joined schools around the country in celebrating Read Across America. Our celebration will be different this year, but still fun. Mrs. Barton, our school librarian, is organizing a literary version of March Madness, in which students will be introduced to several new books in our school library and vote for their favorites. She's even created a book bracket, which will help us find the ultimate winner. Don't worry, as much as we love math at EHBI, there'll be no wagering involved. Each March, we visit the town's 5 libraries for an after-hours story time. It isn't possible this year, but we will schedule 5 Zoom family reading nights themed around 5 famous locations in Dennis. Stay tuned to see which locations we pick. Parents-teacher conferences are scheduled for March 9th and 11th. On these days, the elementary schools will be dismissed at 12:10. That's our K-3 schools. All conferences will be held via Zoom, and please watch for appointments from your classroom teacher. Over at Emmy Small, the students sent beautiful Valentines to the seniors at Maplewood. They were very touched to be remembered and celebrated by our students, and in return sent a basket of kindness rocks, which are on display at the Emmy Small main office. At Nathaniel Wixon, they kicked off their first after-school activities session at the beginning of February. They have 4 different remote activities students can join. And beginning April 1st, we hope to provide outdoor in-person opportunities for all students. Wixon just finished its PTO Fun Run program. We thank families who are able to donate. Even though we don't have field trips this year, we've used the funds to support Wixon through Cape Kids Meals, and have supported many teachers with some supplies that they didn't know that they needed to kick off the school year. At Station Avenue, the students over at Station Avenue sent handmade Valentine cards to the brave nurses at Cape Cod Hospital. They called these cards Hearts for Heroes. In this tradition that SAE has been celebrating for many years, with so many heroes to choose from, they chose to honor our local nurses who have been keeping our community safe during this historic time. And finally, from the high school, the Massachusetts School Library Association has named Jennifer Edwards, library media teacher at Dennis-Yarmouth Regional High School, as the recipient of the Judy Paredes Action Grant. The grant of $500 honors the memory of the late beloved Waltham Public Schools library teacher and colleague. Judy Paredes was the key leader in the school library community and the Massachusetts School Library Association. As a champion of social justice, diversity, multiculturalism, and advocacy, her dedication, leadership, creativity, and enthusiasm inspired many school librarians. Ms. Edwards has been the library media teacher at Dennis-Yarmouth Regional High School since 2013, which serves students in grades 8 to 12. Then the Dennis-Yarmouth Library hosted several district-wide literacy events over several years and brought students of all ages together to celebrate the stories that have inspired them. A strong collaboration between the district librarians made these events possible. The connections made with students in the library increased student voice and drove the direction of the programming. This year, Ms. Edwards had to think differently and consider how to make connections to students working remotely, including some who were new to the high school and had never been to the school library. The Judy Paredes Action Grant will help with this. The school library is planning to collaborate with the teachers in the art and English departments to create a visual art and creative writing project. The spacious library will allow students to safely distance while working with their learning peers on a large-scale canvas, a community mural painted on the wall. The English department is planning to celebrate National Poetry Month in April and create a poetry writing lesson as part of the curriculum. The poems are part of the National I Am From project. The poems will allow students to use their voice to tell their story. The purpose of the poetry project is to celebrate the diversity of the school community, to inspire creativity and unite students during a time of social isolation. The mural and poetry project will be a permanent feature in the school library. Ms. Edwards will be honored at the MSLA annual conference to be held March 21st and 22nd. The Massachusetts School Library Association works to ensure every school has a school library program that is fully integrated at all grade levels across the curriculum and has significant and measurable impact on student achievement. So for more information, you can consult their website. It's the massschoollibraries.org. And in my conversations with Ms. Edwards, she was telling me that it was very exciting to watch the students begin their work on the mural. Several remote students have joined to share their ideas, and one is writing an article about the project for the school newspaper. All the grades are working on the I Am From poems with their English teachers, and the students in the L class and the WAVE classroom and the NEC classrooms have joined in as well. And our department chair, Angela DeRoche, has done an amazing job with the art, with the art students. So we're looking forward to seeing that mural and hearing some of the poetry. And that's my good news for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Good to have good news for sure. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda, and we have a donation that comes to us through the the Cape Cod Foundation's Fund, which is the Nicholas G. Zaros Memorial Foundation Fund of the Cape Cod Foundation. And it is a donation of $4,500 to be used. $2,000 for the U.S. Marine Nicholas G. Zaros Scholarship, $2,000 for the U.S. Marine Will Donovan Scholarship, and $500 for the Warrior Scholarship. So we are very grateful for this donation from the Zaros Memorial Foundation Fund, and send our thanks to everyone who contributed and helped raise those funds and for thinking of DY. And also on the consent agenda are the minutes of the Monday, February 8th meeting. Would anyone like to move the consent agenda?
I'll move the consent agenda as printed.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Calendar is enclosed, bills and requisitions, and now we will do a public comment period before we enter into executive session. So if anyone attending the meeting tonight would like to address the committee, you'll get 3 minutes to speak. Again, this is not a question and answer session. If you have questions, we'll ask you to get those to the right person so that you can get those answered properly. Once you raise your hand, I will recognize you'll have 3 minutes to speak. And we're going to go until no later than 8 o'clock for public comment, please. Vita Morris.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, it's Vita Morris. I wanted to know, there must have been a very late update in the budget presentation, because what was in the packet, at least what I saw in the packet, I was looking to see when you would lower the health insurance and benefit line. And it was exactly the same as was adopted originally. And now tonight's presentation by you shows a totally different figure. So I'm very glad to see that. But this must have been a very late, a version of it, right? Yes. Well, anyway,
Yes.
I'm very I'm just curious, can answer a question on the budget? I can't
Is it
hear
quick-
you.
Yes, if it's a quick question that he feels like he can answer quickly, sure. If it's a in-depth
Well, I mean,
conversation, I'd ask you to.
can he confirm what I just said? You know, that there must have been a very late version of the budget, but
If I could, I'll jump in. Right after the finance subcommittee on Wednesday evening, I said I'd try to make some additional reductions between then and the school committee meeting, because I felt while it's new information, reductions are never problematic often in what we did. So that's how that played out.
yeah, well, I mean, it affected not just that particular line, of course, but the total reduction, because what I was seeing, I think, was 3.60, and now it's 3.37. Yeah, you know, as the number to look at. I'm just curious. It's a small amount, but I'm curious why the administration number doubled from $5 plus some $1,000 as the difference from the previous year to like $11,000 plus. Is there what's the reason for that?
Yeah, the 1000 series. I'm sorry, I don't have, let me take a quick look at my slides. And you're looking at that $11,000?
Mm-hmm. Difference from the
That's pretty
previous
much
year.
raises for some of the staff. There's some secretarial staff at the central office carried under that piece. At present, we have really not discussed any kind of increases for administrators at the central office. So that relatively small increase. There is, again, some staff such as, Mrs. Whale and some others assigned to that line.
Okay. As a matter of fact, how many people are under that budget? A staff, how many people?
Why don't I get back to you with the exact number tomorrow or the next day? Because I don't want to misstate it. We have the administrators. We have some of the technology specialists. That seem strange, but they're carried there and so on. So I just want to check my spreadsheet, not make a mistake.
I would just ask that, Ken can send you a breakdown of that line item, please.
That's okay. Thanks. That's it. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee tonight? I'm looking at the list of attendees. I don't see any other hands raised. All right, that appears to be the end of the public comment period. Would anyone like to move for executive session? Joe Tierney?
Yes, Jenny, thank you. The Dennis-Yarmouth Regional School Committee will enter into executive session not to return to public session for the purposes of discussing strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. SEIUDYRSAA.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. We'll do a roll call vote on this, please. Zane?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Joe Tierney?
Yes.
Phil Morris?
Yes.
Joe Glynn?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So we will go to executive session, not to return to public session. So that is the end of the public meeting. You all have the link to leave this meeting and go to the executive session, right? All right. Thank you. Motion.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.